We have an interesting tradition in our family, which is that at the end of the year we fly to Thailand for a vacation. I am an ordinary working man, working in the office of a large cellular operator and internet provider. My wife Emily is far from ordinary. She grew up in a family where father Robert was a teacher and is now the Minister of Urban Development and Regional Growth. And her mother, Margaret, my mother-in-law, is an institute deputy director, department chair, and political science expert. You can imagine the opportunities I could have realized through this marriage. But as they say, don't rush things and then you won't make mistakes. I didn't behave too brazenly, bringing home money, showing that I wasn't a freeloader. I wanted to prove my worth, not only as Emily's husband, but as a member of the family. I knew that in a family like this, respect had to be earned through hard work and dedication, and I was determined to do just that. Our family, as you may have guessed, had a weekly ritual of going to fitness classes and then the theater, which I personally couldn't stand. Well, at least at fitness you could admire women and appreciate their beauty. In the theater, however, nothing attracted me, only expensive clothes and a certain audience. It always felt like a pretentious display of people flaunting their wealth and sophistication. During the performances, I often withdrew into myself, daydreaming about anything but the play. On one such regular evening, after work, we went to the gym as a family, including my mother-in-law and father-in-law, and I gave everyone a ride. I was fed up with my father-in-law's musings about his incredible work. Although he's not a bad person, just indecisive and always looking for advice. He often sought validation for his decisions, which made him insecure. By the time we arrived, I was annoyed but kept my cool, not wanting to ruin the evening for the others. We got changed and started warming up. My mother-in-law stood in front of me, my wife on my right, and my father-in-law moved to the other group, his odd habit. While we were warming up, my gaze involuntarily fell on my mother-in-law's open back, gradually going lower. I began to compare her with my wife, mentally asking who would win. Today, for some reason, my mother-in-law came out on top. She had a poise and grace that set her apart like an elegant doe among daisies. Her movements were fluid, her posture impeccable. I looked for faults in her, but could find none. I felt sorry that someone like her was next to my father-in-law, who seemed unremarkable in comparison. He lacked her charisma, her confidence, and I couldn't help but wonder what had attracted her to him in the first place. After practice, we showered, changed, and headed to the cafe for dinner. No one wanted to cook at home, except perhaps me, and frankly, no one else knew how to cook. Cafes were our usual place. Surprisingly, there weren't many people in the cafe, probably because it was a Thursday. We sat down at a table and started discussing what to order. As usual, my mother-in-law Margaret took the initiative. She always had the first word, because she was the head of the family. She chose dishes that confused me just by their names. She had an air of sophistication about her, effortlessly choosing dishes that sounded foreign and exotic. Next up was Emily, who after a brief moment of deliberation agreed to whatever her mother chose for her. My father-in-law Robert didn't even bother to open the menu and simply said, "The usual," and then added, "And 100 grams of whiskey, please." Finally, it was my turn, and I chose something simple, a French chocolate croissant for dessert. I wanted something that wouldn't complicate things. The evening already seemed heavy with unspoken thoughts. We were waiting for our orders, and as usual, my awkwardness caused me to manage to drop 2 cutlery under the table. I had to duck under the tablecloth to retrieve them, at which point I caught a glimpse of Margaret's legs, another reminder of how attractive she was. Her legs were trim and graceful, and it was impossible not to notice them. After dinner, we drove home. There I went to the bathroom and happened to run into Margaret in the hallway. She was standing there in almost see-through robe. I approached her and asked her if I had behaved properly at dinner. She took my hand, pressed it to hers, and said, "Richard, I deserve more than just your diligent behavior." Then she kissed me on the lips, letting me know that everything was going exactly according to her plan, and then she slipped into her bedroom. Her confidence was intoxicating, and I felt a rush of emotions, excitement, fear, and desire all mixed together. That night I couldn't sleep. When Emily dozed off, I went to the kitchen under the pretense that I needed tea. Soon I heard footsteps from Margaret, who seemed to be as awake as I was. When she entered the kitchen, I turned off the light, pulled her to me, and kissed her passionately in the full moonlight. In this moonlight we sought pleasure, knowing full well that we were taking a risk. Our spouses were sleeping in other rooms and could enter at any moment. But this danger only fueled our desire. We lost ourselves in each other, oblivious to everything else. The thrill of it all, the secrecy, the risk, made it impossible for us to resist. It seemed that at that moment we were the only 2 people in the world. By morning, we were back to being a normal family with our own values and traditions. We kissed our wives and husbands, hugged and thanked our parents. But as soon as night fell, we were drawn to each other like vampires. Emily wanted me, and I wanted Margaret. It was like we were living a double life, playing our parts perfectly during the day and letting our true desires take over at night. We stayed at a hotel called Hala for 2 days, a time filled with indulgences for me and my mother-in-law. The reason? We were in Thailand and my wife and I had forgotten to renew our passports, which led to a change in our plans. Margaret and I took full advantage of this opportunity and spent the week indulging all our desires while maintaining the appearance of a perfect family. During the day we laughed, explored and acted like tourists, and at night we indulged our deepest desires. It was an escape from reality, a chance to be with each other without fear of being caught. After our vacation, we came home and pretended to be disappointed and bored. Everything that happened in Thailand remained a secret, a hidden, mirrored part of our lives. Memories of our time together were imprinted on my mind, but I knew they had to stay buried. We went back to our usual fitness routines, dinners out and family outings. Life went on as if nothing had changed, but under the surface things were different. The connection between Margaret and I was undeniable, and every time our eyes met, it was as if we shared an unspoken understanding. We both knew what we had experienced, and that knowledge bound us together in a way no one else could understand. It was a dangerous game, but we couldn't help but play it. I often thought about our time in Thailand, replaying every moment in my head. The way she looked at me, the way she touched me, it was all so vivid. I knew what we were doing was wrong, but it was addictive. I began to look for opportunities to be alone with Margaret, even if it was only for a few minutes. A furtive glance, a brief touch, it was enough to keep the fire burning. We both knew the risk, but neither of us seemed to care. We were playing with fire, and it was only a matter of time before we got burned. But until then, we were determined to savor every moment we could steal from the world. The duality of my life was tiring, but I couldn't bring myself to stop. I loved Emily, but my desire for Margaret was completely different, something primal that was impossible to ignore. I knew that eventually we would have to face the consequences of our actions, but for now we were content to live in the moment. Our shared secret was both a burden and a high, and as long as we could hide it, we would continue to indulge our forbidden desires. Life had become a delicate balance, and I was determined not to let it all fall apart.